Hello, this is Ed Flynn, and I'm excited to be your moderator tonight in this important conversation about how we support people in reentry to a life of meaning and purpose and opportunity. And we want to thank the RAND Corporation for putting this together, for the wonderful research we're going to hear about shortly. My personal story is someone that has been engaged in this work, but also has lived it. And I'm very excited that we have such a wonderful group of professionals with great lived experience and professional experience in this space with us. And we all accept the need for accountability. We all accept the need to work hard at preparing for what's next. But we also know the cost to families and communities and businesses if we're denied access to meaningful jobs at a thriving wage and to opportunities for housing, childcare, transportation, and so much more. One of the things I always reflect on is that the talent of our people is wasted in our community if we don't engage in a meaningful way to allow them to have access to education, to credentialing, to all the supports required to be the best they can be. And ultimately, that gets in the way of the generational impact we hope to achieve. So with that being said, I'm excited to let you know a little bit about our panel. We have Deon Barnes-Proby. She's a social policy researcher at Ranch, and she'll be joining us in a moment to talk a little bit about what they have uncovered in their very dynamic research in this space. Jose Osuna, he's the housing justice manager for Brilliant Corners, a statewide permanent housing organization. It focuses on the development of permanent supportive housing for many types of special needs populations, including the reentry area. Jose and I have worked together in the past and brings a significant amount of lived and professional experience that we will all benefit from. Tyrone Walker, who's from Georgetown, and he runs Georgetown Pivot, which is a wonderful program that deals with people in reentry in that part of the country and brings some great insight into what works and what makes sense and what we need to really invest in. We have Amanda Mann, who's from Operation New Hope, and that's in Jacksonville, Florida. And that program is really exciting to learn about and how they serve in a different part of the country. She's the Chief Communications Officer, and we're excited again to learn how they're meeting this problem head on in that part of the country. Crystal Chisholm is a former client of Operation New Hope, and she's here to tell us about her personal journey and what it means to her to have the support previously in her life and what it was like before she had that support and what she's been able to accomplish since then. And so for me personally, it's exciting to hear all these people and what they have to explain to us. So I turn it over to Deon initially to give us some information from RAND about what we should know and why. Deon, it's on you.
Okay, so my understanding is this the introduction part of the session. So my name's Deon Barnes-Proby, and I'm a senior social policy researcher at RAND. I've been at RAND for a couple of decades now. So I started out as a research assistant and really have just sort of grown up with the organization. I'm a social worker by training, so have worked with youth in the juvenile justice system as well as the child welfare system, so at-risk and vulnerable populations as a practitioner, and did that for probably maybe 10 years once starting working at RAND. So my research fits into two big areas. I do a lot of program evaluation, so evaluations of efforts to improve the outcomes of vulnerable populations, one of those being formerly incarcerated individuals. So I'll talk about it, one of the studies that I did in that space. I also do quite a lot of research looking at kind of amplifying community voice as it relates to improving the relationship between communities and law enforcement. So I do a lot of focus groups and roundtable discussions with communities to understand their perspectives on public safety and how we can integrate those views into implementing strategies in partnership with law enforcement to improve the relationship between those two groups. So this particular work that I will talk in depth about shortly was really an attempt to understand how to support formerly incarcerated individuals with attaining more than just a low wage, low paying job, but really setting them up for careers. And we came across this really innovative, novel program in Sacramento County that aimed to help these individuals with attaching to high wage careers. So I look forward to sharing more about that study shortly.
Jose, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Ed, and grateful to be here. Thank you to the RAND Corporation for inviting me to be part of this this great panel. Yeah, my name's Jose Osuna. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am the Housing Justice Manager for Brilliant Corners. We're statewide permanent supportive housing organization. In my purview at the organization is a program called Breaking Barriers, which is a housing and workforce development program done in partnership with LA County Office of Diversion and Reentry, as well as LA County Probation. I also sit on the Public Safety Realignment Team, which is chaired by Chief Gonzalez, the Chief of LA County Probation, where we deal with all things AB 109, also known as the realignment process that happened in 2011 here in Los Angeles County. I'm also the co-chair for the Long Beach Reentry Advisory Council, a newly formed body that sits within Long Beach City's health department that is helping to advise the city of Long Beach, the second largest city in LA County, in all issues affecting the reentry community, including employment, health, and housing. And finally, but not least, I was a member of the executive management team as Director of Workforce Development and Director of External Affairs over a little organization called Homeboy Industries, which happens to be the world's largest gang rehabilitation program. Like I said, very grateful to be here. Definitely want to hear what these great panelists have to say about the intersection around reentry and employment. I happen to have my own very personal opinions on how we should deal with that matter. I believe that people deserve the right not just to employment, but employment at a wage that allows them to not just survive, but also thrive. That's been one of my personal goals in my professional career, is always to create a space that allows us to talk about things in a way that's realistic. We have to provide people avenues that they actually want to walk down and are not forced to walk down those paths. So with that being said, thank you for having me today.
Thanks, Jose. And Jose and I met at Homeboy Industries, where I was also privileged to work for a time. So it's always great to be together in this work. Tyrone, would you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you, Ed. And thank the RAND Corporation for having me and, being a part of this panel. Like you said, my name is Tyrone Walker. You gave me a gracious introduction. I do not run the Pivot program. That's my colleagues. I serve as the Director of Reentry Services for Georgetown University's Prison and Justice Initiative. And I work alongside with the Pivot team. And I work with all 4 programs that we run here at Georgetown. 2 of those pre-release programs. One is called the Prison Scholars Program, which is ran out of the Central Treatment Facility, one of the jails in DC. The other program, we call it affectionately the BLA program, which is the Bachelor's of Liberal Arts program that we run in Patuxent, Maryland, and Jessup, Maryland institution. In the 2 post-release programs, one is the Georgetown Pivot program, which is an entrepreneurship/internship program. And the other one is the Market Georgetown paralegal program, which is a paralegal program. It was designed for people who were formerly incarcerated, who spent a lot of time in the law library, but without skills or without a certification to operate in the field. So we created that program here at Georgetown, and we have them all up and running. And like Ed said, we partner with DC government and the Department of Employment Services, and it's labeled as a workforce development programs, and it's leading people into internships and to full-time employment. And that's how I came to this work. When you mentioned that earlier, I am also a graduate of the Georgetown Pivot program, and I'm looking forward to talk more about opportunities and why formerly incarcerated people should be given second chance on second chance hiring, but not just a second chance hiring just for a job, but creating a real pathway to something that's sustainable. Thank you.
Thanks, Tyrone. I think it's so critical to understand that it's not just about helping people, but then facilitating people to lead, Tyrone, like you and Jose, which allows us to tell a completely different story, where the sky's the limit based on your ability, your interest, your effort. Congratulations on all you do. And now Amanda from Operation New Hope.
Thank you so much, Ed. And thank you, RAND Corporation, and to the other panelists. It's a privilege to sit with you all tonight and speak with you and have this discussion. I think it's really important that we lift up these voices. I have the privilege of sharing stories of the people that come through the program at Operation New Hope. We've been providing reentry services for the last 23 years in Jacksonville, Florida, like Ed said, and we are excited to be expanding and creating a statewide reentry network in the state of Florida. We just opened last week our new program location in Orlando, Florida, and we are just thrilled to be growing and serving the people who are returning from incarceration in our state and hopefully beyond at some point, because we know that the need is there, and we think that providing the services, training, and support provides people with the opportunity to succeed. You guys have all highlighted that when we give people opportunities and we give people actual pathways and training towards living wage work, they do respond positively and they do excel. And so we just are just thrilled that we have the opportunity to help people in this transition, in this path through reentry. We have three main programs at Operation New Hope. Our core program is the Ready for Work program. So when people leave incarceration or have even been impacted by the criminal justice system, they're eligible to come and enroll in our Ready for Work program. It's a year-long support where we provide case management, mental health counseling, and job coach services, along with career development and vocational training to allow people to acquire the skills and support that they need to be successful upon reentry, to prevent that recidivism and to help break that cycle of incarceration and poverty. We also have a pre-release program, our Ready for Release, where we are in 30 state prisons across Florida, and we are providing people with case management services and reentry transition plans, because we all know that when you can identify or see your goal, that you're far more likely to attain it. So we are working with people even prior to release to set a vision for who and what they will become. And then our newest program is our Ready for Success program. We learned a lot during COVID, and one of the things we learned is that, like we're doing tonight, a lot can be achieved virtually. And so we're building an e-learning platform now for our career development curriculum. And we have, through COVID, been providing, if you think telehealth services, like with our case management and our job coaching and mental health therapists, because we are hopeful that those who can't come to our program locations hopefully can get the services and support they need through a virtual platform. So we're really excited to be growing and expanding and hopefully connecting more and more people to meaningful living wage careers.
Thank you, Amanda. So we're also very excited that Crystal's joining us, who can talk from some real life experience, as most of us can, and really set the table for what is required of us, which is to listen, to pay attention, to understand what people need, not what we think they need. We might understand what people, we might know what pain is, we might know what challenge is, but we don't know what somebody else's pain is or somebody else's challenge is. We can be empathetic to it, but if we listen to them, we'll be much more effective in serving them. So Crystal, please tell us a little bit about you.
So my name is Crystal Chisholm and I'm 31 years old. I am an operations manager for Camp Craft Cocktails, and I'm a former client of Operation New Hope. When I was 17 years old, I was actually sentenced to 35 years in prison. After fighting for my freedom for 10 years, I was given my second chance and released onto probation. And then back to Jacksonville, Florida, where I found out about Operation New Hope. Going into Operation New Hope, I was confused, not knowing where to go or what to do. I was 17 years old when I went in. So as far as knowing how to live an adult life, I had no idea. And I didn't know even what questions to ask or what answers I needed. And upon going to Operation New Hope and doing a Ready for Work program, I was able to get the answers and the support needed to go on, because I was very scared and I didn't know how to get a job, how to even apply for a job, or, you know, where my career path would even take me, because I had some experience, but not too much experience. All of my experience came from doing time in prison. And so doing the Ready for Work program, I was able to learn the skills to be able to fill out an application, to have a resume, to sit in on interviews and have that confidence in an interview to show that I can handle it, that I'm not just, you know, somebody in prison that just don't know anything. I actually know something. And so to receive that confidence, you know, not only was I able to get the support that I need, but I also had the encouragement to keep going. So it was, no matter what roadblock I hit, even within the year, even now it's been almost 4 years since I've graduated Operation New Hope, they're still there for me and they still support me if I ever walk in anything. But I would never be an operations manager if it wasn't for them today. Like if I didn't have such a huge support team to be able to keep pushing me and to tell me that I can do it, it doesn't matter, you know, your past or what you've done or where you've come from, like you are able to do it. If I didn't have that and that encouragement to keep moving forward, I wouldn't be where I am today. So I'm very lucky to be able to share that story, and I'm more than lucky that there's programs like all of you that are there to support and to fight and to be there for us and to give us that support and that encouragement.
You know, Crystal, we're having a small problem with your network bandwidth, and that is making Jose laugh for me to be actually saying those words and knowing what they mean. Historically, that's not been my strength, but we're going to see if we can make that be improved so that we can get some more from you, which is really important for us to hear. While Dion gets ready to speak, I'll just leave us with a thought that I heard in 1985 from Jack Eckerd when they ran the Eckerd Youth Development Center in Okeechobee, Florida. And I heard many years later, every day, from Father Greg Boyle at Homeboy Industries, everybody's worthy, not everybody's ready. And so the work is to become ready, to be the best you can be, to be supported in that. And Dion, maybe you can lead us through the research and what you learned and what you can share with us to help facilitate the next level of conversation with the panel.
Okay, thank you. Well, thanks so much for that, hearing all of the panelists share about their experiences and the great work that they do is just an honor to be a part of this panel and to share with you some of the work that we have done in this space as well. So I'm going to review over the next few minutes what we learned from one part of a two-part study that really looked at how we can improve employment outcomes for the formerly incarcerated individuals. And I'll start out with some background information. So as many of you know, 1 in 4 American adults have a criminal record, which adds up to almost 65 million people. And depending on the offense and the outcome of their case, people with criminal records might be ineligible for certain types of jobs, so automatically sort of excluded from certain industries based on the outcome of their cases. And this next slide. The situation is even more difficult for people with a felony conviction, which includes about 20 million Americans. So after serving their time, this population often struggles to find a low-wage job, let alone, as we've all been talking about, a meaningful and well-paying career. Next slide. So looking at this data from 2010, which is the most recent data that we have on employment outcomes for this population, the Prison Policy Institute indicates that the unemployment rate was around 60% for formerly incarcerated individuals after being released from prison or jail in the year 2010. And that is compared to what was the highest, like the peak unemployment rate for the general population in 2020, which was 15%. It was even lower in 2010 when we look at this data for the general population, about 10%. So 10% versus 60%. There's a huge disparity there in the unemployment rate for individuals who were formerly incarcerated. So as a result of this high unemployment rate, formerly incarcerated individuals face significant challenges like having difficulty paying their bills or finding affordable housing or supporting their families. Next slide, please. So given the difficulties that we've talked about relative to this population in trying to find good jobs, it's really critical to have access to effective programs like some of the programs that each of you represent and the one that we'll be talking about that really match candidates with employment opportunities that can lead to well-paying careers and not just low-wage jobs. So I'll discuss one of those programs that really aim to break down some of the barriers and build bridges to those types of careers that we all feel are and know are critical for success. Next slide. So the program that we studied is called the Career Training Partnership, and this was a public-private partnership that was established by the Sacramento County Probation Department to provide job training and placement to individuals on probation. And this partnership included the Probation Department, the County Office of Education, Northern California Construction Training, or NCCT, which is a nonprofit organization that provides training for careers in construction. But in addition to these three large organizations that were part of this partnership, they also engaged with or partnered with construction firms and labor unions to allow for placement into jobs once training was complete or even during the training process. Next slide, please. So we visited this, we conducted a site visit where we conducted focus groups and interviews with all of the program partners. And we also talked to those, some of the individuals who participated in the program with an effort to understand how the program operated and get perspectives on what worked well and what were some of the challenges with implementing this program. Next slide. And CTP, or the Career Training Partnership, combined three different key components. Education, which was primarily focused on providing a high school diploma or an equivalency certificate for those probationers who didn't already have that. Vocational training, which included train-specific classroom, but also hands-on instruction, along with opportunities for certification. Someone earlier mentioned the importance of having access to certifications and credentials. So this program did offer that as well. And then job placement with a labor union apprenticeship program or with construction firms that specifically had a career trajectory. Next slide. And CTP estimated that about 92% of the probationers who completed their program or participated in their program were placed in either an apprenticeship program or in employment with a construction firm. But this was data that wasn't captured systematically, so we did recommend that they collect and track outcomes on a systematic basis to better verify and validate this data. But their placement rate was fairly high. Next slide. So now I'd like to share a little bit of feedback that we got from the program partners. So it's one thing to understand what the outcomes were, but what did people have to say about participating in the program? And the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. One staff member said that the program really helped probationers to be able to better support their families. Another described the program as offering a hand up and not a hand out, which meant a lot to the probationers who didn't want a handout. That's not support, just some assistance to help connect them to, give them the skills that they needed and connect them to employment. Next slide. And probationers specifically shared favorable remarks as well, indicating that they felt that this program really changed their lives and that they would be worse off if they didn't have the program, and that it gave them a sense of self-worth. Next slide. But in addition to the positive attributes of the program, there were some challenges. So program participants indicated that there were some barriers to participation, which, despite the fact that the program was free to probationers, and that was cited as a benefit, it was also unpaid, which can be a hardship because this was a fairly lengthy program. It was 5 days a week, up to 6 hours a day. It could take up to 9 months to complete the program. That's a long time to go without income when you've got competing demands for your resources. So this is a huge commitment, which was sometimes difficult for participants to be able to meet their conditions of probation. If they're spending all day in a classroom, participating in this program, it's hard for them to meet their conditions of probation, and also hard for them to fulfill their family and financial obligations. Next slide. Other barriers that were mentioned included access to transportation, and this was either due to limited availability of public transportation in the area, because this program did have a van that would travel around Sacramento County. I think there were like 3 locations that they would pick people up from, but people didn't always live in close proximity to where the vans would pick them up. So they would have difficulty accessing public transportation to get to those locations if they were kind of in the outskirts areas, or individuals sometimes had a suspended or revoked driver's license. So transportation was an issue. And another barrier to participation that was mentioned is substance use. So this was a common probation violation, was individuals having issues with substance use. Next slide. So the program also faced some challenges. So what I talked about previously were barriers that the participants encountered. Now I'm going to talk a bit about barriers that the program itself encountered, and that included struggling with student attrition, so students not completing the program. So according to one program staff member, about half of the probationers who were referred to the program showed up on the first day, and then half of that half completed or continued on with the program. So there were folks who were dropping out even from the beginning when they were referred. Next slide, or next, you can just click the next button. Actually, go back to the next slide, the prior slide, sorry. So we made some recommendations. These are the recommendations that you see on the screen that we made to the program to try to help participants to stick with the program. And a couple that I'll highlight for you in this discussion that the program has made significant progress in trying to implement. 2 of those are, the first is exploring the feasibility of providing a stipend or some type of compensation to alleviate the financial burden of participating in the program. So trying to see if they could identify resources that could be used to cover the cost or offer some type of payment to program participants. And then the other area that the program has made some great strides in trying to address is partnering with a drug treatment program to provide on-site services rather than participants having to leave the program site to participate in treatment. So trying to co-locate to improve access and reduce the likelihood of someone maybe having a substance-related violation. All right, next slide. And after completing this study, we received a lot of interest in figuring out how other agencies can implement this program. CTP also received a lot of requests for guidance on how to implement this program or replicate this program in their community. So we offered a set of recommendations for those agencies who are interested in standing up a program like this. First being really assessing the market demand and identifying the industries that are friendly to people with a criminal record. This particular program focused primarily on construction, which historically we know is in high demand and is friendly to individuals with a criminal record. Really partnering with employers and unions to build trust and connect workers to the various stakeholders. working with a reputable training program. The NCCT training program was a known entity among apprentice programs, among construction firms in Sacramento County. So they were able to leverage that reputation of this training company to place individuals in apprenticeship programs, those who had completed this training program. Also working with program participants to provide mentoring to those who participate. And then finally, hiring a coordinator or a liaison who can oversee program operations is another thing that we recommended. So in closing, our overarching recommendation really for any program that seeks to connect job seekers who have a criminal record with prospective employers is to combine both job placement support with incentives for employers. And with that, I will turn it over to Ed to transition us to the next step.
Thank you, Dion. So as we move into the discussion phase, I'll just hand it over to each panelist for their opportunity to share. I'll just take a moment to say that part of my present work is at the Mid-Ohio Food Collective in Central Ohio. And while we serve 180,000 meals a week to folks for decades now, we understand you can't feed people out of poverty. So the goal now is to use technology to connect all the opportunities for social determinants of health to be met, obstacles to be removed, and access to be increased, whether it's credentialing, education, or connection to employers. So thank you, Nick Davis at the Mid-Ohio Food Collective, for the opportunity to be a part of that. And now I think it would be great, Jose, how about if I start with you? I know you have some strong opinions and great feedback on what it means for us to define success in this space. How do we determine whether we've been successful in serving this community?
Just based on what Dion presented, and thank you for that great presentation, Dion, a lot of great information. It reaffirmed a lot of the things that I was able to experience when I ran a couple of different programs for Homeboy Industries, where success is really defined, I think, in a very innovative way. Most organizations track their success on spreadsheets based on numbers and outcomes. At Homeboy, it was done in a very different way. Two things come to mind. Training is great, but it means nothing if it doesn't lead to actual employment. That was something that I experienced when I ran their solar panel training program for some time. And it was a great training program in partnership with LA Unified School District that really gave people some great training around a very, at that time, cutting edge industry here in California. But unfortunately, the industry wasn't ready to hire folks. And so, we were able to establish a partnership with the then Governor Brown's office to really open that industry up. There were a lot of solar projects around the state of California that were subsidized by the state of California. So Governor Brown was really able to use his bully pulpit to kind of open the doors for the folks that were coming out of that solar panel training program. And then on the other side of that, getting someone a job is great. But having folks maintain and sustain those jobs, I think, is the real measure of success, right? You can have a great placement rate at an organization and placing folks in employment, but how many of those folks do you have employed still 2 or 3 years down the line? And how have they been able to elevate within that industry itself to higher wages and higher positions? For me, that's always been a key measure of success in the work that I've been able to do around workforce development. And I'll close with this on this piece. I'm really glad that you mentioned the stipends, Dion, around the training. Fortunately, I experienced 13 years of my life as a person that was incarcerated. When I came out, I wanted to succeed and I wanted to live a different type of life, but I also knew that I had access through illegitimate ways to money and making money. And so, it wasn't worth my while to take training, as you said, for, a full day without something coming out of it for me and being able to sustain myself and my family. Fortunately, when I went through the solar panel training program before I ended up leading it over at Homeboy Industries, we were given a full-time minimum wage stipend. So every 2 weeks, I was given a paycheck through Homeboy Industries so that I could meet my needs and sustain myself and provide a little bit of support for my family. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because I think that that's something that we always have to keep in mind. If we want people to really invest in themselves, we've got to be ready to invest in them as well.
Thanks, Jose. I think it's so critical to remember that effort requires a result on the other end. And all the training in the world does not mean anything if not just a minimum wage, but a living wage is provided for you and your family and the people you care about, or else you're going to lose your interest and you're going to lose your momentum. And we all understand that. So Tyrone, maybe I can turn to you. Could you tell me why reintegration into society is important? Why is it important for us to consider reentry a significant place for us to put time, energy, and resources?
Well, that's a great question, Ed. And I often tell people, like, you want to know who's going to be living next door to you. As a person I'm a former juvenile lifer. I served nearly 25 years of incarceration. So, and I always say that only two things happen in the cell, even in cell of science, either something going to be successful or it's not. And inside of a prison cell, either a person is going to spark up with life or he's going to succumb to the darkness of that cell. And if you want that person who have succumbed to the darkness of that cell to be living next door to you, then like, what does that say about you as a person and your moral compass, right? And I think it's important that we just remember that we all people. I think sometimes like they attach labels to us, as inmate, prisoner, all these type of names that we don't go by. And then they attach the number to us. They remove your name and they attach numbers and labels to you as if you're not a person. And so if I wasn't given a chance, and like Ed, you right, like I was home 10 days and I went through the Georgetown Pivot Program. They paid me a stipend. They paid me $15 an hour for academic work. And then when I went into my internship, they gave me an extra $2 and gave me $17 an hour. And that was a 10-month-long program. Like how could I sustain living like without being provided something? And that enabled me to support myself, to help with family support, with food and stuff, because essentially another person that's entered the house and like food start leaving from out of the refrigerator. Bills go up, water, all these things going up. And so to be able to provide people with a stipend as they do workforce training, because that's the way we label it, as workforce development and training. And it gave me a chance to like showcase the skills and the things that I was able to do as a person. And like without getting that second chance, like I don't know where I would be at. I don't even call it a second chance, because that was the first job I've ever had in my life out in the community. So I didn't have a second chance. I had a first chance at life. And so a lot of people saw that, and they saw that I was eager to learn. And like Dion said something that was so like perfect on that slide. What we see today in the programs, like we provide stipends and things like that to help them. Like it's the substance use that's unraveling all the things that we're trying to help with. And we see that going across the nation.
Tyrone, I sit on some boards in recovery, and while I've never personally experienced it, my family surrounds me in it. And it's a significant component of what we have to deal with. People need help. We have a question from Reverend Walter Contreras. So Kimberly, if you could please allow the Reverend to ask his question, that would be great. Reverend Contreras, are you there? Well, we'll come back to that in a
No, he
moment.
asked how important a stipend can be. He said, key takeaway here is how important a stipend or a living wage can be.
It's a human being's right to be able to eat, to sleep in a place with a roof and heat, to have plumbing that works. Jose and I learned over a couple of experiences that if you can't have a hamburger at lunchtime until your first paycheck, you're not going to show back up to work.
I think the Reverend
It's
might have to
just-
unmute himself, Ed. I see that in the chat. Are you able to unmute yourself, Reverend Contreras?
Or maybe the host can.
We're trying, Rev, but we can't hear you if you don't unmute yourself.
He
No.
cannot. Well, Reb, if you want to type your question in, we'll be glad to present it to the panel.
And while we're waiting for Reverend to unmute, I also wanted to follow up on the point that you just made about people have got to eat. And not just the individuals, but these are oftentimes fathers and mothers. So they've got to feed their children. And we sometimes see these as isolated individuals and not part of a larger family unit that they need to provide for. So I just wanted to make that point about the need to, it's not just supporting the individual, it's all of those in their constellation that you're also supporting.
Yeah, that's why generational impact is so significant in this space, because every one of us that goes on this journey has children, grandchildren, partners, parents, and there's a whole community affected. While we're waiting, I was thinking, Crystal, we'd come back to you and talk about what are the things that worked for you. You went through service. What worked for you?
I think what worked for me the most was just the loving support, because, you know, I was coming from a place where you didn't get support. I'm coming from an institution where, you know, they look down upon you because you are just that number. And, you know, coming out and then starting Operation New Hope, it was like, that was a whole 360, completely turned around. Like, these people just took me in with loving arms, like a mother would their child, you know, and it was like, we're here for you, we'll do what we can. And it was just, you know, they helped me get my birth certificate, my social security card, my ID. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't even know how to do that stuff, but they helped me every step of the way. And then it was just the training, and even the stipend at the end of every week helped me so much, because, you know, with being on probation, I needed that income too. I had to show something. And, you know, so I say support so much because that's what anybody ever needs when they get out, you know, not to be judged or looked down upon. They need a chance. They need to be believed in, and they need to have that support system and that encouragement to be able to make it. Because if they don't have it, then what do they turn to? They turn to something that's already put them in a bad place. You know,
They probably haven't had it before, right?
Right.
They probably
Right.
have not had that support system before, and having it, that's why I get frustrated when people talk about second chances. Most of my friends haven't had a chance. And so it's not a second chance. I see that Kathy, one of our attendees, has a question. Can Kimberly, we move over to Kathy and let her ask for our panel? Kathy's going to speak to us directly.
Kathy, can you unmute yourself, please?
I think the Reverend was able to unmute himself.
Yeah,
Reverend Contreras, are you there?
they both are.
Oh, sorry. I just not be careful.
Well, Kathy, let's start with you and then we'll move to the Reverend and get both your questions in here.
Sorry. I am not be careful to touch the scream.
She might not have had a question and just raised her hand.
yeah.
Accidentally.
Gotcha. Reverend Contreras, are you there? Well, we'll be patient, and if he is able to connect, we'll certainly take. One of the things I wanted to do, Amanda, for you, talk about how you engage a community that has often been dismissed and not heard and not seen.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think that that's really important. I think I touched on it briefly, is that I have the privilege of magnifying the story of people who are often overlooked. I mean, quite literally, we hide them away and put them in a space where we pretend they don't exist. And the failed experiment of mass incarceration here in America, I think we're all reckoning with the last 40 years of how many people we've hidden away and how many people we've not given a chance to, and how many people we've just overlooked and forgotten. And so I think it's really encouraging and powerful to hear someone like Crystal say that they were welcomed, that they were looked at, that they were encouraged. I think the greatest gift that any of us humans can ever engage in is empathy, right? But for the grace of God go I. None of us have ever walked a life of perfection where we have not done something wrong, where we have not made a poor choice, where we have not been careless in our actions and our words. And like you started the panel out with, Ed, speaking to the point of, we have a justice system that is there to provide consequences and rehabilitation when people do make poor choices. But once someone has paid their debt to society, I think it's crucial that we allow them to re-enter society and contribute to society, because like Tyrone said, who do you want to live next to, right? Who do we want to surround ourselves with? We want to surround ourselves with people who have the opportunity to be themselves at their best all the time. And I think that it's such a privilege to be able to not only help provide support and training to people so that they can figure out who they are, but to actually see them and tell them that they're worth who they are and that they're worthy of being their fullest potential, right? I think all of the success that I've had in my life was because my family and my parents and my community told me I was worthy, and that I was able to be successful in my career because other people who knew me were willing to vouch for me. And I think that the work that we do at Operation New Hope is that we see people, we tell them they're worthy, and then we also reach out to the community and we find people, employment partners who are looking to hire, and we say, Crystal's worth it. This is why Crystal's worth it. We've worked with her now the last few weeks. This is what Crystal's doing. And this is why Crystal is someone that you should bring into your community, into your family, into your employment. And I think that if we all spend a little bit more time investing in empathy and investing in hope for others and for our community, then we would all be more successful. We'd have less incarceration, therefore less drains on our tax base. We'd have more people who had meaningful employment, who are happy and could contribute. We'd have more taxpayers. We'd have a stronger economy. It just makes good, easy sense to invest in humans. And so that's why I get up every day, so that not only do I get to share the stories, but that I can hopefully magnify other people's voices who have been ignored for way too long.
Well, time is flying, but before we close with each participant having some final comments, I'll start first with you, Tyrone. How do we facilitate leadership opportunities for people with lived experience? How do we provide Tyrone a chance to not just be in the work, but lead the work? Because isn't that critical to success at the end of the day?
Hey, that's a great question. I've had a lot of discussions with other organizations to actually serve on quite a few boards, and one of them is Ed Trust with their fellowship. I'm on their advisory board for Ed Trust Fellowship, and I actually met them at a dinner one night, and I heard the young lady was like, you know, directly impacted people needed to be leading a lot of these organizations. And I laughed. She's like, why you laugh? I said, because I'm tired of y'all saying that. Like, because one, when I look at your organization and I look at the people that you got employed, nobody's on the staff that's directly impacted. And two, you haven't even created a fellowship position to teach that person the skills to go out to lead. So please stop saying that. And they kind of took me up on that and like found funding, and we created those Ed Trust fellows who are now doing policy work. So I got tired of seeing just only me in the space helping to do policy work. When there's thousands of people coming home, is millions of people who are formerly incarcerated who do have some skills. And so, like I said before, I'm a huge fan of that we're all being given opportunities, even all of us on the screen here, somebody to open the door for us somewhere along our careers, right? And so we need to continue on open the doors for every person. Not because, you know, you got a conviction, we can't open the door for you. Like, no, every person who really wants an opportunity, that's the first thing must happen. It must happen, Ed, that the individuals must want it. Because sometimes we all see success differently. So we have to look at what do the people that we're actually servicing, what does that person see as his or her success?
So
That's that person's success.
We're going to go around the room as we get to a close. Tyrann, that's powerful, because a man in leadership, which you are, creates the representation of what's possible and what's right. Jose, why don't we come to you? I know you've got strong feelings about what it means to create opportunity, not just in the work, but to lead the work.
Absolutely. I mean, I echo everything that Tyrone just said. You know, for me, that has been one of the key fights, not just here in LA County, but I think here throughout the state of California. You know, I'm privileged to lead, you know, the government affairs and the housing justice work for an organization that has almost $1 billion a year budget. They've entrusted me with that responsibility. You know, they've entrusted me to build the relationships with, you know, the Board of Supervisors here in LA County, with our state officials, with our federal officials around funding, around policy that affects people that have experienced homelessness and incarceration. And so, you know, when organizations talk about things, as Tyrone said, I really think it's important for them to actually follow through with that. That's one of the things that I truly appreciated about my time at Homeboy Industries, was the fact that time and time again, Father Boyle allowed me to lead the organization around its government affairs and around its advocacy work. And I've had the same experience now at Brilliant Corners, where the CEO has been able to entrust me with those key relationships, with working with the LA County Probation Department around acquiring, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars of funding for our organization and other government agencies that we work with in supporting people that have experienced incarceration. I will say this, there's a saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, that those that are closest to the pain always have the best solutions to alleviate that pain. And so when we allow people to lead the work that have actually experienced the problems that we're trying to fix, I think we, as a community, we can just be that much more effective. It also just makes a whole lot more sense. I'll touch on this and then I'll shut up. Dion talked about the learning that they did up in Sacramento County. You know, and one of the findings and recommendations with that was that they have a full-time coordinator for the program up there. I happened to be the coordinator for the program that we ran in partnership with LA Unified. And I think the biggest difference that we had, because there are many solar panel training programs here in Southern California, but the biggest difference was that Father Boyle and the Homeboy team, and actually the LA Unified School District, allowed those of us that had gone through the program and experienced incarceration and had come out of the gang lifestyle to actually lead the work. I think that made us much more effective coordinators. It allowed us to build different types of relationships with the participants and find a very high level of success, not just for graduates of the program, but actually placing them in and allowing them to be successful beyond the training and beyond placement, actually finding meaningful lives with meaningful employment. So, just wanted to mention that and make sure that folks were aware of that.
So Amanda, we have a couple of minutes left. How does your organization work to make sure that the seats around the table are filled with people that bring to it not just learned experience, but lived experience?
Yeah, no, I think that's crucial. We've had the privilege now of serving over 9,000 people in our 23 years. And so that gives us a great pool of candidates to draw from. So we have 4 or 5 people on our team right now who have lived the experience. One of our board members actually is a former client. And so I think everyone's absolutely correct that inviting those who understand most intimately the problems and struggles to the table, having a voice and sharing that voice and projecting that voice out is highly important to finding the solutions to the pressing problems of mass incarceration and persistent recidivism and most unfortunate persistent poverty. There's plenty of wealth in America for us to all find ways to access it.
Thank you. And so just to bring this to a close, I want to thank Crystal, Tyrone, Jose, Amanda, Dion. I mean, the conversation has to continue because the challenge is, how do we facilitate with the important communities we need to engage with, whether it's the elected officials on policy change, whether it's the funders who support us financially so that we can do the work, whether it's the other social service agencies, because nobody can do everything. It's a continuum. How do we hand back and forth folks that need support and make sure that they fit and land where they need to be? And then how do we find connection to educators and skillers that recognize that maybe the first time someone enters into this world, it's like landing on Mars. There needs to be a warm handoff, a support system, navigation, coaching, and a recognition, as Jose used to tell me every day, it might be 1 step forward and 2 steps back, but don't give up, because eventually there's going to be something significant that happens in that person's life and in that family's life. And if we don't do the work and connect them to employers who have such a tremendous need for people that will show up on time, do the right thing, stay until the work is done, we all suffer. Families, communities, and our country. Again, it's been exciting. The call to action is that on September 27th, there'll be another event where you're invited to participate with another panel of experts around how the work is done and how we might be successful in it. And I also want to encourage you to understand in the call to action that there is something you can do. If you hire people, be open to hire people because of the work they do, not because of the mistakes they've made. If you're somebody that's looking for a place to invest in people, and the return you see will be significant. And if you really believe that God does not make any junk, make sure that every human being has the opportunity to make the most of their life and add to your life. So thank you for being here. It's been amazing. The panel's been great. Great to meet those I haven't known and great to reconnect with friends that I've known a long time. Thank you again to the RAND group. Dion, it was amazing to see your information. I know you'll make that information available and we can all use it to our best purpose.
Definitely.
Again, thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you
Take
all.
care.
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.